So here is every single Apple Silicon Mac Mini ever launched. M1, M2, M2 Pro, M4 and M4 Pro. Now, how good are these and how much performance gain is there exactly between all of these generations? Well, that's what you're gonna find out. But the thing is, when benchmarking these, I discovered that Apple's gain between generations is so ridiculously good that if Apple keeps this up, the PC market is just gonna die.
They took the little ones.
Because I recently benchmarked all the i9 Intel CPUs from 12th gen to the newest Core Ultra 9. The difference between the 4 generations, Apple gains between 1 generation of upgrades, which is ridiculous. And that comes from a PC guy. I'm worried, guys. Should you be worried? Well, I'm gonna show you how good these are and actually explain different workflows, which one should you be getting and what does it mean for different generations. And also I found out how much they've increased the power draw between the M1 and M4 Pro. I haven't seen that online anywhere yet. Well, you're gonna see it here at Tech Notice. This part of the video is sponsored by iThankYou Fusion Dock Max 1. The ultimate Thunderbolt 4 dock designed for Apple Silicon. The connectivity of it is simply insane. It supports 4 up to 6K displays up to 60 Hz. Because of the dual Thunderbolt 4 support, you will never run out of ports again. If you're looking for the ultimate dock for your Apple Silicon, then this one is most likely it. Check out the dock in the video description below and make sure you take advantage of their Black Friday sales. By the way, if you enjoyed these videos, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because there's a lot of different videos coming out about the M4 devices. For example, one is peeking up over there. The M4 Max MacBook Pro is absolutely insane, but for creative workflows, let's check out how good it actually is. And I've done it, so check it out on the channel if you haven't already. And if you do feel like there's a temptation to purchase any of these Mac Minis, feel free to use the links in the video description below. Now, I want to start with the power draw because that's not what I see people talk about online. And it's rather hard to find on Mac, but with certain right plugins, you actually can see how much power draw they draw. And I did the M1, M2, M2 Pro, M4 and M4 Pro, but the only problem is because of the 8GB of RAM on the M1 and M2, they are not really running Redshift or Cinebench R24 GPU test, which means that the GPU power draw has little asterisks on there, and it tells you that I'm using peak performance wattage, what I'm seeing pulled in Geekbench 6. By the way, the Mac Minis I'm comparing are all the base models, and it's nice to see 16GB in the newer base models. So interestingly, between M1 to M2, there hasn't been that much power draw difference. From M2 to Pro, there is quite a bit of power draw difference, but the M4 is pulling less power than the M2 Pro. And in a minute, you'll see why this is so impressive when you see the benchmarks. And then the M4 Pro, they've cranked the power quite a bit higher, and it's almost double what you see on M4, and literally more than double compared to the M2. And as you can see, these wattages power draw, if you know PC world, this is absolutely ridiculous. Let's take a look at some benchmarks then. Cinebench R24, which is not just a drag racing benchmark. Some of these people actually use them for creative workflows. Cinebench, After Effects, you know who you are. The M2 is 10% faster in single core and 23% faster in multi-core scores. That is good gain between generations. The M2 Pro isn't that much faster than the M2 in single core score, but is about 66% faster in the multi-core score. That's about 40% faster in the multi-core score between M2 and M2 Pro. That is pretty impressive. Now the M4 is 58% faster in the single core score, which is absolutely ridiculous, and literally double the score of M1. So from M1 to M4, we have double the score, which is interesting. M1 to M2 to M3 to M4, there's been roughly about 25% gain on each generation of multi-core performance. Now, do you know how ridiculous that is? We don't see that in the PC world. That's insane. And the M4 Pro is scoring about the same as M4 on the single core score, but is 197% faster than the M1. Yes, that is 3 times faster than the M1, which is ridiculous. By the way, very important note, when you're seeing these benchmarks, the M4 looks very, very impressive. But in the end of the video, I'd like to tell you why most people who want to upgrade the M4 shouldn't use the M4 upgrades, because Apple's upgrade system is broken on the M4 and I'm hoping they'll fix it. And most people should go with the M4 Pro. Geekbench 6, 12 to 14% on M2 performance gain. M2 Pro is actually slightly slower in single core score than the M2 and about 47% faster in the multi-core score than the M1. M4 is 61% faster in single core score, which is even more, but multi-core score is a little bit lower than on the Cinebench R24, 71% faster. The M4 Pro is 65.2% faster in the single core score and about 131% faster in the multi-core score. Yes, that is more than 2 times the performance of M1. Looking at the iGPU and graphics performance on Geekbench 6, the M2 is about 37 to 41% faster than the M1. M2 Pro is 120% faster in OpenCL and about the same in Metal Score compared to the M1. And the M4 is 74.3% faster and about 70% faster in the OpenCL and Metal compared to the M1. That's very close to double the GPU performance compared to the M1, which is pretty insane. Again, the M4 Pro though takes it to a whole nother level, 178 and 187% faster in the OpenCL and Metal scores, which is insane. As you can see, the Pro versions of the chips have a lot more graphics cores and are a lot more powerful in terms of the GPU performance. So if you look closely, you can see that the M2 Pro is actually faster in GPU performance than the M4, and that's because the Pro chips have more GPU cores. Now moving on to Adobe Photoshop, and these M1 Macs all perform very, very well in Photoshop. In fact, a lot of the cases are a lot better than the PCs. If you've seen any of the other PC benchmarks on the channel, have a look at the M4 Max video on benchmark results and then you'll know what I mean, because that was so good that I actually had to compare it to desktop CPUs and whole desktop setups because there was no laptop good enough to actually beat it. But the M2 is about 12.8% faster in the overall score compared to the M1. M2 Pro is about 50% faster compared to the M1, which is huge boost, especially if you want to find some of these used or on a second-hand market. You'll know how good these are. The M4 is beating out the M2 Pro and is 83.7% faster than the M1. That's ridiculous. Usually you can see these performance gains like in a CPU intensive benchmark like Cinebench, but not in Photoshop applications like these. That's ridiculous. And if you look at the M4 Pro, is more than double the performance of M1, which it's absolutely insane. Especially the filter score is 147.9% faster. That is almost 2.5 times the performance. Just a little note here on Photoshop benchmarks. The M4 Pro is faster than any PC I have ever tested on Photoshop. Whether you're running RTX 4090 and really fast RAM and, you know, some of the Ryzen desktop CPUs that pull almost 10 times as much power, it's still not as fast, which is ridiculous. Moving on to video editing and Premiere Pro. Here you can see the M1 didn't complete the extended score because it's got such a little amount of RAM, and Premiere Pro really likes more than 8 GB. So if you're thinking about using Premiere Pro on Apple Silicon, please do yourself a favor and cash out the $200 for extra 8 GB of RAM to get the 16. But at that point, go with the M4 because none of these will make any sense to go for because it's very expensive upgrade, these older ones, unless you can find them on second-hand market. 8 GB for Premiere Pro really isn't enough on Apple Silicon and Windows. But looking at the M2, which is 50% faster than the M1, which is really pretty ridiculous. The M2 Pro is 83.7% faster than the M1. Interestingly, the M4 is slightly slower than the M2 Pro because of the GPU cores. And if you know the M and the M Pro, they often have more GPU cores and better encoders, which actually shows in some of these cases here why they are so much better. And the M4 is not better than the M2 Pro. So if you're doing video editing, the M2 Pro might be better for Adobe Premiere Pro. The M4 Pro though is absolutely ridiculous. 157% 50% faster than the M1. And we're looking at almost 50% faster than the M2 Pro in the Premiere Pro, which is ridiculous. If you look at the GPU scores, obviously that's quite a bit faster in there. And the interframe, which is ProRes codec, is 258% faster. That's insane amount of performance the M4 Pro gets. Now, when we're looking at DaVinci Resolve benchmark, the M1 didn't complete it because there's not enough of RAM and the benchmark just doesn't launch in there, Future Bench for DaVinci Resolve. But the Pro versions are a lot better than the M versions because, again, the GPU cores. DaVinci Resolve likes to use a lot of GPU cores. The better the GPU is, the better it is in DaVinci Resolve. Certain codecs it can play back, but when it comes to exporting, color grading, and some of these things that are accelerated on the GPU, having more GPU cores is better. The same reason the Mac Studio M2 Ultra beats out some of the M4 Maxes, because of the more GPU cores and more powerful GPU. Moving on to 3D and Blender, firstly CPU, we can see that the M2 gained about 10 to 45% in different scenes. I would say between 10 to 15. The junk shop scene, that's really not working properly because to get 6 and 8.7, it's probably because of the low amount of RAM and it can't run it properly, so it's ridiculous. But about 10 to 15%. M2 Pro is 50 to 54% faster than the M1. That's in CPU performance, but the M4 absolutely smokes the M2 Pro as well and is 82 to 81% faster than M1. M4 Pro is 164 to 158% faster, and interestingly, there's quite a big difference between the M4 and M4 Pro when it comes to CPU rendering in Blender, as you can see in there. It's about 50% gain between M4 and M4 Pro in Blender in CPU rendering. But let's move on to GPU, because you can use GPU as well in Blender 4.0 and above, I believe. So this is Blender 4.2. In here, the M1 and M2 didn't complete the benchmark because, again, 8 GB of RAM. But the M2 Pro and M4 Pro, you can see, interestingly, the M4 is 54 to 67% faster in the monster, junk shop and classroom scenes, which is quite impressive. And I didn't expect that because the M2 Pro has a better GPU, there's more GPU cores, but the M4 must run them faster and more efficient. Architecture is a little bit different and it beats them out. The M4 Pro is 227% faster in the monster scene than the M2 Pro. And that is ridiculous. We're talking almost 3 times the GPU rendering performance than M2 Pro. Now, if you're going from the M2 Pro, upgrading to M4 Pro is a huge upgrade. When did we see that last on Windows PCs where the same tier, whether CPU or GPU, let's say even from 12900K to the Core Ultra 285K, or just so you know, you're gonna get 3 times the performance. Say again? Yeah, 3 times the performance. Or, by the way, when going from RTX 2080 Super to 4080 Super, you're getting 3 times the performance. That's ridiculous. Looking at browser benchmark and Speedometer 3.0, the M2 is about 25% faster. Interestingly, the M2 Pro is slightly slower than the M2 in here, and that's what I've seen as well. When it's very simple, lightweight, single-threaded tasks, can we say single-threaded because Apple doesn't have threads? It's a bit of a blasphemy, isn't it? The M2 Pro sometimes is slower. The M4 is 61% faster than the M1 and smokes the M2 lineups. And the M4 Pro is actually, interestingly again, slightly slower than the M4, which is the same kind of pattern we're seeing between the M2 and M2 Pro on M4 and M4 Pro. The Pro chips are slightly slower in single-threaded browser benchmarks like the Speedometer 3.0. And then let's take a look at Redshift, which is the Cinebench R24 GPU test. And you can see here, again, I don't have M1 and M2 because not enough RAM, you can't really do it. M2 Pro, M4, M4 Pro. Interestingly, the M4 is about 40% faster than the M2 Pro. That is insane. That's really ridiculous, considering that the M2 Pro has the same amount of RAM as the M4. It's pretty impressive, and it costs double what the M4 costs now. The M4 Pro is a whole nother level, 173 170 roughly % faster than the M2 Pro, and almost doubles the performance from M4 to M4 Pro. But Cinebench R24 likes to use as much RAM as possible, and the M4 Pro actually has 24 gigabytes instead of 16, so that is a little bit of a benefit as well. Now, I mentioned that the M4 looks impressive, but for most people, you might not want to upgrade this because it's a little bit of a scam, and I think Apple's done it on purpose, but I want you to catch this out. Now, when you want to upgrade the M4 Mac Mini, it's not right because you're paying $200 for 8 gigabytes of RAM when you want to upgrade to 24 gigabytes, okay? And that point, you're getting closer and closer to the M4 Pro. Now, when you match the storage and RAM compared to the M4 Pro, you're looking at, look at that. I can get this $400 cheaper than the M4 Pro. But that is not exactly right because upgrading the M4 Pro is a lot cheaper than the M4. For example, if you're going with 48 gigabytes of RAM, so you're getting 16 gigabytes of extra RAM, that costs you $400. That is extra 24 gigabytes, so doubling it, 24 gigabytes for $400. Where in here, for $400, we're only getting 32 gigabytes of RAM on the M4. As you can see, the RAM upgrade is a lot more expensive on the M4. And so is the storage. For extra $200, you're only getting 256 gigabytes of extra storage. Whereas on the M4 Pro, because you're already going with the high-end Pro pricing, we're giving you a discount on our storage, and for extra $200, you're getting 512 gigabytes of storage, which is literally half the price, or you get twice as much for the same amount of money, which is ridiculous. And if you look at how much more money it costs to double the specs of what you already have, so from 16 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes, and from 256 gigabytes of SSD to 512, so we've literally doubled everything that's inside the Mac Mini, we're paying $1,200, which is twice the price of M2, meaning the upgrade options are absolutely ridiculous. They're way too expensive, and anybody who wants to upgrade your M4 Mac Mini, I wouldn't do it. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. At this price point, look at that, at $1,200, please do yourself a favor and try to find extra $200. I know this sounds ridiculous, but for extra $200, you're getting a lot faster M4 Pro chip, and you're getting Thunderbolt 5 ports because M4 doesn't have Thunderbolt 5, M4 Pro does. You get faster GPU, faster everything, and the upgrade options are even cheaper. So the only M4 Mac Mini I would buy is the base model. If you're thinking about upgrading it, don't do it. It's not worth it. Try to jump straight to the M4 Pro. So now, which device is for who? And is it worth upgrading coming from any of these, humongous Mac Minis? And the answer is the M4 Pro is a ridiculous upgrade to anyone in the M1 or M2 Pro. It's absolutely insane. Now, the question is whether you should go Pro or M4, the non-Pro or amateur. Can we say amateur? Amateur Mac Mini? I would say that if you're not doing any particular video editing or very heavy GPU rendering or GPU heavy stuff, the M4 is absolutely fantastic. Try to figure out a way how to get the storage not upgraded and manage with just 256 gigabytes of storage. If you want to see my Apple storage guide on how to get storage more and cheaper than what Apple offers, then check out the video. I'm going to leave it in the video description below because you can get a lot more storage for a lot cheaper. Just go check it out. I think people just looking for a device that's for web browsing, emails, and just workstation setup like this, it's absolutely fantastic. Tons of ports, tons of I/O, tons of everything. It's insane. Now, if you want faster networking and you're thinking you're gonna be using 10 gigabytes of Ethernet, try to get that from the get-go, because adding that later is gonna cost you double the amount, which is my issue right now. The biggest problem I have with this MacBook dock here is that the Ethernet is slow, and getting 10 gigabit Ethernet, I know this is already expensive. I'm gonna have to pay $150 to $200, which just seems ridiculous, and I wish there was a little bit of a better option, and it is on the Mac Mini. Just get it from Apple straight away, 10 gigabit Ethernet. That is a very good upgrade, and that I would actually do on the M4 as well. The M4 Pro is people who are doing a little bit more video editing in DaVinci Resolve and so on. It is absolutely insane. In Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut, this guy is gonna fly. It is absolutely insane. And you can upgrade this RAM even more. And I would highly recommend upgrading the RAM first of all, and then storage second. If you can, don't pay anything for the storage. There might be some third-party people coming out with storage upgrades, because when you've seen some teardowns online of this Mac Mini, the storage is actually a little plug-in device. It's not soldered on anymore. So there might be some third-party upgrade options available. So stick around for that. If not, until then, check out my storage guide. But if you want to upgrade the RAM, because that you can't do later. And upgrading the RAM on the M4 Pro is a great idea. 48 gigabytes, I think, is a very good sweet spot. That's going to take you around $16.99. Is that the best bang for buck you can get for, you know, a workstation? Well, here's the thing. If you want to check out the best bang for buck PC build guides, I've got some linked in the video description below. And for the same amount of money, you can get something better built for your money. A lot more performance in CPU and GPU, but it's a lot bigger, takes a lot more space, uses a lot more power. So it depends what's important to you. If you like a little bit more DIY and you don't like the ecosystem, perhaps checking out those PC builds is a great idea. But if you want plug and play and you don't mind paying Apple tax and prices for the upgrades, this lineup is impressive. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks guys very much for watching. Bye bye.